Hello and welcome to Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. My name is Kelly and I'm a former wedding planner and blogger, and I'm obsessed with weddings. If you're planning a wedding in Ireland, you're in the right place. You're going to learn the tried and tested methods to planning your dream wedding without the added stress. Think of this as your one-stop shop for everything to do with planning your wedding in Ireland, with me, your new wedding planning bestie, and a cup of tea. This is Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online. How many couples start planning their wedding and realize that they are completely clueless and have no idea about the wedding industry, about how to do things, and really how to plan their wedding? That's pretty much most couple. I was one of them. I am a former wedding planner and I had planned weddings before planning my own wedding, and even I had to learn a few things. So if you're feeling a little bit overwhelmed, like you don't know anything, a little bit lost in the dark, that's totally okay. You're not alone. But today I'm going to walk you through 5 things that I learned while planning my wedding so that you don't have to learn those lessons as you go. You'll know them ahead of time, but I'm not just going to tell you what the 5 things are. I'm going to give you some tips, some helpful things along the way. These are things that a lot of wedding industry professionals just already know. So they're insider secrets, really, but they're going to help you to plan your wedding in a way that is manageable, that's not stressful. We don't want to be overwhelmed. We don't want to feel panicked. So I'm just going to help you kind of walk you through a few things to get you set up to plan your wedding in a way that is not stressful. So with our 5 things, let's start with the first one. First thing that I learned and that I wish I knew before planning my wedding is that timing is everything. Now, this goes for all the decision making. There's a correct order in which to make some decisions. So, for example, you can't send out save the dates until you have a wedding venue, because then what ends up happening is you might end up with a wedding venue that can't accommodate the amount of people who have received a save the date, and then you've got to uninvite people, or you've got to pick a venue, you've got to go look for another venue when you found your dream one. So it just gets a little bit stressful. You can't buy your wedding dress too early, because then what might happen is you end up with a dress that doesn't match the style of the wedding. It could be a dress that doesn't fit you properly, or maybe a dress that's no longer in style, or something that you don't enjoy anymore. So there are some things that need to be done in a certain order at a certain time. And so if you can nail that, then everything's going to be a breeze. So we do have a few episodes on the timing side of things. One episode is number 55, where I've broken down the correct order to book your wedding suppliers. So I highly recommend that you listen to that. I'm going to give you a little bit of a summary of that episode, and then for more details, you can go and listen. I said it's number 55. So this is a rough idea of the order that you can make some wedding decisions. Step number 1 is you choose the type of wedding you want. So this could be, do we want a big wedding or a small wedding? Do we want a traditional wedding or a modern wedding? What kind of style do we want? And you really take time to put words to your wedding style. Then you set your date. And now I have mentioned before that when it comes to your date and your venue, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg situation. Do you find your dream venue and then you find out when they're available and that helps you to choose the date? Or do you choose your date and then you look for a venue that's available on the date? Now, when it comes to that side of things, that is really dependent on you as a couple and what your priority is. For me and my husband, our priority was our date. So we looked for a venue that was available on the date. For some couples, the priority is the venue. And then you would find a venue and see when they're available, and then you choose your date accordingly. That order really is up to you. It's just helpful to know what your options are. So you've got your wedding style, you've got your date, then create a rough guest list. This is a step that I always recommend you do before looking for a wedding venue. So if you are going to choose a venue and then pick a date based on it, I highly recommend having a rough guest list beforehand. I alluded to this before by saying that if you choose your wedding venue after you've sent out save the dates, then you might end up having to uninvite people. So having a rough guest list before you choose a venue means that you know roughly how many people you want to invite. You don't have to have it nailed down. You don't have to have sent them anything. It's for you to know if you're dealing with 100 guests, 200 guests, 300 guests, because there's quite a big difference between those figures. So choose your style, choose your date, create a rough guest list, work out your budget, and then start to book your suppliers. So in episode 55 of the podcast, I gave you the order to book your suppliers in. So that will help you to make crucial decisions. But the idea here is that if you understand that timing is everything, you already know one thing more than many other engaged couples. Item number 2, it's not all about me. So now something we say often is your day, your way. That is 100% correct. You do want the day to be something special for you. You want to pick and choose the traditions that mean something to you. You want to ditch the ones that don't fit with your style and your personalities. That is all still true. The day is still about you. It is your wedding day. We're celebrating your wedding story, your love. All of that is still true. But it's not the only thing that's true. Everyone's going to have an opinion. And so I'm not suggesting that you listen to everybody's opinions and you accommodate everyone. But really, what I'm saying here is that we want to take into account the experience of the guests. So yes, you want to have the day that's magical for you, but you also want to be mindful of creating an experience that your guests will remember for all the right reasons. Because remember, the whole point is to celebrate your love, but with all your friends and family. So you want to make sure that you're making it amazing for them too. So here are a few things that I recommend. Make it easy for guests to RSVP. In the simplest form, they just need to know when to RSVP and how. And you can decide those details. Seat them thoughtfully. Things like avoiding the singles table. I've said that so many times on the podcast. The singles table is terrible. Avoid the singles table. Keep the seats that are closest to the speeches for the guests who are hard of hearing or vision impaired. You want them to feel like they're part of what's happening and they're not missing out because they can't see or hear properly. You could create a kids table that's fun for the younger guests if you're having them, but make sure that that table is near their parents so that the parents can at least keep an eye on the kids. Another thing you can do is you can think about what's important to your guests. Now, there'll be some really specific things that are important to different groups of people. So you might be really into dancing and partying, and you know that that's big for your guests. You may have loads of foodie friends, you know that that is, like a delicious meal is great for everyone. But in general, you want to give your guests something to do, and you want to give them somewhere to sit. So as long as they aren't standing around for too long without an activity or something to nibble on or sip on, you're good. And then final thing is to consider the weather. Now, nobody expects you to be, the weather forecast person or to change the weather or anything like that. But the idea here is to look after your guests means to keep them cool when it's warm, like a really, really warm day, and keep them warm and cozy when it's a cold day. Simple. So if you want more details on how to look after your guests in some really simple ways that aren't going to cost you loads and loads of money, episode 22 is the one for you. It's called The Best Ways to Look After Your Wedding Guests. And I've walked you through some of what I've just shared now, but in a lot more detail with some more examples and ideas and things that you can do. Okay, let's move on to item number 3 of 5 things that I wish I knew. Don't make decisions based on price. So I mentioned earlier that creating a budget is a really helpful step in deciding which suppliers to book. So yes, knowing what suppliers cost and what you can afford is definitely important, but it's not the only thing that's important. It's true that you get what you pay for. And so if you're only choosing suppliers based on what they cost and you end up choosing suppliers that are on the cheaper side, often, not always, but often, you end up with suppliers that are less experienced. And there'll be some items on your wedding list where that's okay, and other items where you want to put more focus into having seasoned professionals who have been doing this for a long time and they know exactly what they're doing. So it's important for you to understand what you're getting. So there are some really clever ways that you can save money. We actually do have lots of resources on the Weddings Online website, but I'm going to give you a few tips on how you can save money while still making sure you're not necessarily basing all your decisions on price. So consider all-inclusive packages. Things like a wedding venue that comes with the tables, the chairs, the linens, and a wedding coordinator, somebody who's going to pull it all together for you and release you of stress on the day. Choose an off-peak date. So off-peak dates are dates like winter dates or midweek dates. You often find that suppliers and venues have special off-peak rates, and you can save money that way. Another thing is you can look for the bridal sample sales. So you can find some really amazing dresses that have severely reduced prices, and they're still incredible dresses, and no one's going to know if they're last season or this season because it's a beautiful wedding dress that looks good on you. That's what counts. Another thing is you can save your money on photos, but do it strategically. I'm definitely not advocating for finding a friend and saying, can you do this for free? Because either that friend doesn't know anything about photography and that's not recommended, or it's a professional wedding photographer and you shouldn't be asking for things for free anyway. But what you could do is you could ask if there's a payment plan. So find your dream photographer and just ask the question, do you have a payment plan? Is there an option where I could pay you in installments? You can ask about the different packages, see if there are any extra things in the packages that you don't need, and if eliminating those things would have an impact on what you pay. Really, the point here is to ask questions. Don't just say, this is the price, I can't afford you, but go back and say, I really love what you do. Is there somehow we can work together? The worst that they can say is, unfortunately, we can't work this out. And then you're like, okay, cool. At least I know I've tried. Item number 4, trends go out of date very, very quickly. Now, there are a lot of couples who wish they learned this much sooner. So I'm telling you now so that you don't learn this the hard way. If you've ever looked at your parents' wedding photos from the 80s or the 90s, you'll know exactly what I mean. You know, poofy sleeves, big hair. You don't want to be that person that gets married, has all the trends, everything's very dated, and then in however many years' time, your children, grandchildren, friends, and family, they're looking at your pictures and they're like, oh my gosh, that is so cringy. So this is what I recommend that you do. Choose your trends strategically. So no one is saying that you should get rid of all the trends, but you should use the ones that mean something to you. Something that you've seen that you think is really special, go for it. But don't do all the trends. Opt for more classic wedding elements, particularly when it comes to style and attire. Things that you can look back on and go, that was a classic wedding look. Put a big focus on the experience of your guests compared to how everything's going to look. Focus more on what guests will feel, how they will enjoy the day, things like the band or the music or the food, whatever. Those are the things that people will remember for years to come. If you had to think back to a wedding you went to 5 years ago, do you remember the centerpieces? Honestly, there's only one wedding that I remember the centerpieces of, and that's only because they stole my wedding idea before my own wedding, and I was irritated about it. No other wedding can I tell you what the centerpieces were, but I can remember amazing moments on the dance floor, delicious meals, and really special things that happened. So if you're going to be planning a wedding where you want your guests to have a great time, focus on what they're doing and less on how things look, and then you're less likely to have a wedding that looks dated in the years to come. And finally, the day flies by, and really, it does. Every week, we do a real wedding feature on the Weddings Online blog, and almost every time, the couple will say the day just flies by, and they're not joking. There's a reason people say this so much, because it's true. Your day does fly by, and there are so many ways that you can still remain present so that it doesn't feel like it's flying by, and you don't look back on it and go, oh my gosh, where did the day go? So I'm going to list a couple of things that you can do. First, add wiggle room to your timeline. You don't want to be rushing from one thing to the next. That's how the day flies by. Be okay showing emotions. It's going to help you to be grounded and present by just being okay, crying, laughing, whatever it is that you feel. Don't try and brush the moment past quickly. Consider getting ready together as a couple or having a first look if that's something that you might be interested in. It just means more time together on the day. Consider sharing private vows. It could be something that you do during a first look or at some other point in the day, but it's a moment to just really pause and go, okay, it's just us. This is our day. This is what I promise you. Enjoy your meal together and then make a point of spending time with one another during the day. Some people choose to have the couple's sweetheart table. Other people want to enjoy the meal with their guests. There really is no wrong answer. It depends on your priority and your focus. But what I'm saying here is make a point of spending time together as a couple on the day at some point. It doesn't have to be the whole day. Just find moments. And then sneak out for alone time. So many couples say that, somewhere between the meal and the formalities of the evening, there's always an opportunity to just nip out and just have a moment as a couple and to be like, oh my gosh, we're married, and just soak it all in. Make a point of doing that if you can. Now, if you want to know a bit more about being fully present on your wedding day, I want to encourage you to listen to episode 47 of the podcast, where I shared similar information to what I've just shared with you now, but some bonus tips, some super practical things that don't feel like they have anything to do with being present, but they will help you, I promise. So a little recap. These are the 5 things that I wish I knew before planning my wedding. Number 1, timing is everything. Number 2, it's not all about me. Number 3, I shouldn't be making decisions based on price alone. Number 4, trends go out of date very, very quickly. And number 5, the day flies by. It really, really does. Well, thank you for listening today. The Wedding Wednesdays with Weddings Online podcast is produced by me, Kelly, and mixed, mastered, and edited by Glenn Hartman. For more wedding planning tips, advice, checklists, and more, visit weddingsonline.ie.